Hey there, podcastians. It is another Thursday, and I am super excited about bringing you this episode today, because today's episode is all about how you win awards. And what could be more exciting than winning an award? That feeling of going to the dinner, having your name read out as a nominee, counting down all of the people that win the lower level prizes, crossing your fingers that you'll be the one, and then finally, hopefully, you being announced as the gold winner, the number one winner for whatever thing that you are entering into. If you have yet to have that experience, that is certainly an experience that you definitely want to have. It is really, really exciting. If you have had that experience already, then you will know just how fun and just how exciting that is for you and your team. But the process of winning an award, it's not that it's complicated, but it's one that is not done properly by most people. And I and teams that I've worked with have won a lot of awards over the years, whether it's 2 awards from the Enterprise Business Collaboration, whether it's a Jive Award, whether it's the Brandon Hall Award. Lots of different awards that I've won over the years. And in each of those that we have won, I've completed the award submission, and the award submission has always gone down so well. And it's the submission that wins you the award. Yes, it's what you actually delivered, but if you don't put what you delivered in a way that's really compelling and really sells what you are doing or what you've done, you're not going to win that award. You know, I've seen a lot of companies doing incredibly amazing things, not winning awards because your submission wasn't right. Equally, I've seen a lot of companies who haven't really done a lot at all win first prize for awards, and you're like, why on earth did those guys win and not us or not some other people? It's all about how that award submission is put together, and in this episode, I want to talk you through exactly how to create a winning award submission. Now, why is it so important to get an award? You might think, well, you know, it's just an award. Why get an award? We don't need the pat on the back. We're doing a great job. And I'm sure you are. But there's more to an award than just recognition, right? The first part is, of course, recognition. Recognition is really important. Taking a moment to take stock of all the things that you've achieved, and then going back, putting it all down on paper, showing somebody else and say, look at this amazing stuff we're doing. And someone else, you know, independently looking at that and saying, you're doing amazing things. And then recognizing you for it. That's huge, right? Don't ever undersell that. That's huge. And rarely do we make time to actually do that and actually get these awards put out. So you should be actively chasing awards when they come up, even if you don't win them, even if you think the work that you're doing is too small scale. You should be taking the time to actually go in for these awards, because apart from the recognition side of it, they also help you take stock. They also help you look at what you've done, to consider it, to consider how aligned it is, to see just the huge breadth of things that you've achieved. Oftentimes when we're in these things, we forget just how much we've achieved. Taking that time to really think about it and show what you've done, show what you've achieved, and showcase it. That's really important too. It really helps you take stock, and it helps you feel proud. You know, it helps you, give you that pride to say, yeah, well, actually, we've done so much, even though it might feel like we're in the thick of it right now. When we look back at all the stuff we've done a hell of a lot. And another reason why awards are so important is because they're huge success stories, and they're very, very good PR for leadership. You know, leadership love awards. Who wouldn't? You know, a leader's job is to drive their teams to success and recognition. So that team getting recognition, winning an award, huge good news story for the leader. So for your own personal leader, massive success story, something they can shout about. For other leaders, these are opportunities to influence. These are new conversations that you can have. You can come in and say, yeah, we recently won an award. And that makes leaders sit up and take notice and say, wow, okay, so these guys are doing something really significant. I hadn't given them enough time before, but now I need to have a look at what they're doing. And guess what? Because you've got that award submission, you can show them what you're doing in a really concise way and tell the story, right? So you have that story and you can create that new conversation, bring in new leaders, bring in new sponsorship, remind people of just how important the thing is that you're doing. And that's especially important when you're working in the field of change, because change takes a long time. And people get bored. People get bored of, following what you're up to. The first 6 months is great and everybody's excited. But when you're sort of 18 months in, people are like, oh yeah, they're just carrying on with the program. It's a 3-year program. Things are doing well. It's like, no, this is really significant what we're doing. And you should see the stuff we've achieved over the last 18 months. See the change, right? Because oftentimes it can be so slow and gradual. People don't see what it's like. It just kind of happens to them slowly. They don't take stock to compare how things were 18 months ago. And they won't fully appreciate all the amazing stuff you've done. So, go for awards, right? Find out who is offering awards for your sector. That's the first piece of advice, obviously, is find out who is offering awards for your sector. Start cataloguing them all. Start showing when they are going to be appearing, like as in what time of the year they're going to be appearing, and when the submissions open and the dates that you can submit them for. All right. And now for the rest of the podcast, we're going to talk about how you win. But before I kick off all of that exciting stuff, have you subscribed yet? If you're just joining the podcast right now, you might not have subscribed yet. You should subscribe, because if you subscribe, you're going to get the latest updates with all the latest episodes, and you're going to get all the back catalogue of the stuff that I've done before, which is interviews, guides, tips and tricks, a whole wealth of knowledge to help you be successful. So make sure you've subscribed. And if you are listening to this and you're already a subscriber, review this podcast. Please take a time to go off and review the podcast. It only takes a few minutes. If you go out of this episode, create your award submission, and win, and not come back and leave me a review, I'm going to be devastated. Devastated. So make sure you leave me a review. Please take a moment to leave me a review. Every single review helps me go up the ranking in iTunes and Stitcher, get more people listening into this podcast. I've seen some amazing growth in this podcast over the last 6 months or so. It's huge growth in the listenership of this podcast. Thank you, everybody, for sticking with me and listening in. And it's been so amazing to hear all your feedback on social and everywhere else. So please take a moment to review the podcast. It would mean the world to me. And lastly, if you haven't done it already, send me an email or get in touch with me. Email me, dan@imdanthomas.com. Let me know about the stuff you've got going on, and let's kick around some ideas on how you can win an award. Or get in touch with me on social. Send me a DM, follow me on Instagram, @I'mDanThomas. Follow me on Facebook, @I'mDanThomas. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, @I'mDanThomas. Wherever you want to find me, go ahead and find me, subscribe, follow, do get in touch. Let's keep the conversation going. Podcasts are pretty one way, so let's get involved in conversation offline too. And don't forget, you can leave me a voicemail on Skype. Type in "I'm Dan Thomas," ring it up, goes to voicemail, leave me a voicemail, let me know what you think of the show. All right, let's get into it. Let's get into how do you win an award. I want to talk a few things before I start about how you don't win an award, right? And why so many people's award submissions kind of go unnoticed or unchecked. I'm going to be a little bit controversial here. And the first thing I'm going to say is the problem with too many award submissions out there is they stick to the structure for the submission. Right? And that's going to sound a little bit weird, right? Well, let me explain what I mean by that. When you go to submit for an award, they're going to give you a form. They're going to give you some boxes to fill out. They're going to ask you some questions, and they're going to create a structure for your feedback, for your submission. They're going to want you to give that submission in. And you absolutely should fill out that form and fill out that structure and fill out that thing as best you can. But what people miss all the time is that there's nothing that's going to stop you from giving them much, much more. Much, much more. Every award that I've submitted for and won, I've submitted 5 times more than they've asked for in separate packs for separate things. What award nomination committees are looking for, what they want to acknowledge, is transformations. They want to acknowledge stories. And the more you can tell that story, the better. And the more you can illustrate that story, the better. So whilst they might have a form that you should fill out and, just go through and it's all word-based and maybe you throw in a couple of screenshots, if you give them tons and tons more that they can look at, a lot of these submission places, they want to turn your submission into a case study. They want to turn it into something that they can talk about, a blog or something that they can share afterwards. If you have gone way out there, way beyond, and created something that's going to offer them tons of content for them to share and talk about, yours is going to stand out, right? You can attach these things. There's nothing stopping you from adding a whole nother pack on with the award submission to say, oh yeah, we've also got this whole submission going. So actually, you should see the submission form as a shorthand of the bigger pack that you produce. And the great thing about producing a bigger pack is you can write them in ways where they are universal for whatever it is that you're submitting for, and they can be applicable for multiple awards. Because some degree of winning awards is actually in volume, right? The more awards that you can enter into, the more chance you have of winning. The problem is most people just end up doing completely bespoke submissions for every single award, and it just takes too long, right? So they don't really enter anything. And then they wonder why they didn't get too far, right? And that might have just been, there just happened to be a really strong competitor at the time. But if you look to put together a single unified pack that tells your entire story, and it includes every single possible aspect of that story as one piece of work, and then you just very quickly tweak the wording in it for each individual submission that you submit to, and then you just take paragraphs out of it and stick them into the submission form, now you can both apply for awards at scale and also deliver 10 times more than they were expecting. It just wows nomination committees. They're like, look at all this stuff. Look at all these amazing stories. They might say, can you name an example of when you have created an outcome that looks like this? I'll give them 5. And I'll cover every single different industry and sector within the business that I've delivered amazing outcomes for that, right? I'll give them multiple outcomes for every single question. And then I can be like, you choose. This is all the amazing stuff we've done. You choose, right? I don't need to choose the best one. I'm going to give you the 5 top examples in my particular area or in answer to your particular question. And now that cannot go unignored. That is something that you cannot ignore. That is something as a nomination committee you want to see. You absolutely want to see. So that's the most important thing behind this is I'm not going to talk about how to fill out a submission form. I'm going to talk about how you create a single unified paper story that is so compelling, that sells your story so well that it will be an attachment to all your submissions and it will make amazing submissions. And you'll just be able to take pieces out of it, put it into the submission form, and then attach it along, and it's going to wow those nomination committees. And that's how I've won all of my awards, right? It's not just about the work. If you don't tell the story, if you don't wow them with the submission, you won't do your work justice. But it's not possible to keep making loads and loads of different versions of this thing. No one's got the time. It is if you create one single unified thing. That unified thing, that's going to take you some time. But the good news is you can repurpose it beyond awards. You can submit it to leaders as like a summary pack. I've done it where I've created these award submissions as big stories and then had them printed out, really nice quality paper, as magazines, as booklets for leaders to be able to read on the train or, when they're traveling. Really nice quality printed out, properly laid out, designed story that they can read. They can hold that story in their hands and they can read it. Right? You can repurpose this stuff. It's not only limited to the award. You could also reuse it on social. You can reuse it in your content online. You can showcase the stories and use them as examples in your community, right? It's got multiple purposes. This time that you're going to be investing, it's not purely related to awards. You can repurpose it all. It's time very well spent. It's also time that helps you look back, realign, re-strategize, map out your roadmap, and then present your story really, really well to your audience. So, right, I need to move on from that, but hopefully you get the idea. So, how do we do it? How do we start creating our pack, right? So, I'm going to talk through each of the different sections that you should be including within your pack, right? How you structure an award-winning submission, section by section, how you create this big paper that's going to be absolutely killer. It's going to win you this award. Now, side note, of course, you need to be picking the awards that fit your particular paper here, right? So make sure you pick the right awards. Little pro tip, if there's the opportunity to enter for multiple awards, do. Because this pack's going to cover lots of different things that they can choose anyway. And if an award submission agency ever says to me, oh, you can choose as many categories as you like to enter into, I'm going to enter into all of them. Because hopefully you'll win something, right? Obviously, when I say all of them, I mean all of them that are relevant. But, you might win something somewhere. They might say, oh, actually, your submission wasn't quite enough to win in this one particular category. But who's saying you can only enter into one category? They might say, oh, yours was really, really strong. It wasn't quite enough to win this particular category, but it was so strong that we thought it should win another category, right? That happens a lot as well. So enter into multiple categories. Okay. So how do we create our paper? Well, the first thing is it needs to be designed really, really well, okay? Think of your branding, think of your story, think of your organization. Do nice design for your paper. Simple design, it doesn't have to be crazy artwork and everything. Simple, clean, well designed. Get your design team in, get your brand team in, get someone to make it look good. You want it to look like a professional ebook, a professional paper that you would get from an agency that's going to be really, really well presented. Look and feel is part of winning this. So make sure you spend the time to typeset this properly, to design it properly, to make it look good. Invest a little bit of time in making it look good, and then put it together. Now, I like to make my submissions as a landscape A3 or A4 when I design them. The reason being is then you can repurpose them as a booklet, right? So it's 2 A4 pages side by side into a landscape A3, and then you can fold it over and you can turn it into a book, and then it kind of reads as a book, and that's quite nice, especially if you want to print it out. Again, kudos there. If you want to enter an award and you want to give it even more edge, print it out really nicely and send that to the award submissions people. They like that. So get it laid out, print it out nicely, and then the structure. Well, the first thing you want to do when you start to create this thing is you're thinking all about story. Story is the most important thing. As you work through the paper, you're going to tell a story of what you intended to do, what your plans were, how you implemented them, why you implemented them, why that was important, what you did, what you discovered, what you learned, what you achieved, and the results. And at every point of that story, you should be making it evidence-based. Right? What did you learn? We learned this stuff from this evidence. What did you achieve? We achieved these things, and here's the evidence. And the stronger the evidence can be at every single point, the better. You always want to be backing up everything you say within this, within either your strategic direction and alignment, right? We did this for a specific reason because it was in our plan. Or we did this and these are results and here's the evidence. Or we did this because this evidence told us to do it, right? At every single point. That's really super important. I cannot stress that enough, because something that submissions agencies really look at is they want to see the evidence, right? What leads you to support that? Most people are just going to go out there and say, yeah, we tried a whole load of these things, and they're going to throw a whole load of vanity metrics out. Comment counts, like counts, view counts, vanity metrics. You want to be talking outcomes. What has this changed in your business? You know I bang on about outcomes all the time. This is so important here. What has this changed in your business? What has this led to? What changes it created? What business outcomes has it created? What customer outcomes has it created? We're not talking about counting stats here. We're talking about business outcomes. These business outcomes are what are going to win you the award. Because when it's read as a story, they're going to read it and they're going to say, wow, this really had a significant impact on the business. Otherwise, if it's a whole load of counting vanity metrics, it's just going to feel like a campaign that went really well but didn't actually do anything for the business. I created 1,000 comments. Yeah, but what did you do with the comments? Well, we didn't do anything, right? That's not a good outcome. So always outcome, always evidence orientated within your paper. That's what's going to win it. So the first page of your paper, other than a nice cover page, of course, is your executive summary. And your executive summary is a one-page summary of everything that's contained within the paper. Copywriting is really important here, right? It needs to sell the story. It needs to be a killer first page. I recommend actually writing the executive summary towards the end, when you can actually pull out the numbers and you can look back and see everything that you've done. But the executive summary needs to be aspirational. It needs to sell whatever it is that you're talking about. You know, over the last 5 years, we as an organization have been on a journey to change the way that we work, to change the way that we collaborate, to create incredible outcomes for our customers. By changing our behaviors and working together, we can create new culture for our organization where our people are empowered to share their knowledge, share their expertise, and support each other in creating amazing outcomes. And over the last 3 years, we have done that. We have driven new culture change through use cases in customer outcomes, front office outcomes, back office outcomes, project management outcomes. And we have 10,000 groups of thriving people to support it. You know, this is the kind of language that you use. And don't feel like this is laying it on a bit thick. You know, the whole point is you're creating a story and you're pulling them in. You want them to come out of that executive summary and say, oh, right, okay, I'm stoked now. You know, I want to hear more from this. This sounds like a really, really good one. You have to really think about empowering the reader and creating something where they're going to read it and they're going to say, I want to know more. So that's your executive summary. Within your executive summary, you want to include your headline stats. If there's benchmarking stats, benchmarking is a really, really good thing to include here. You know, all submission companies love their benchmarking. If you have a benchmark, and especially if you've got ones that are comparative to others in your industry or in your sector, then you should be including your benchmarks within your executive summary and some very, very high-level figures and numbers that show some of the incredible things that you've done, right? Killer executive summary, that's the most important bit. Once you have that executive summary, now we're going to move into our background. You need to tell the story, right? And the way you tell the story is to say how the story began. How did the story begin? Well, firstly, who are you as an organization, right? So information about you. You've got X many people, you work somewhere, you do something, the kind of stuff you see in an About Us section on your website, high-level information about your organization, you know, a bit of scene setting. This is who we are. And then start talking about what your strategy is. Okay, what are your key priorities and why? Why is this important to your organization? Why did you choose to do this thing? Why did you choose to make this change? Why? So you set that strategy down and say, this is what we're looking to do. We're looking to deliver amazing outcomes for our customers. We're looking to create customer relationships. We're looking to maximize capabilities. We're looking to lead in customer experience. You know, all these kind of statements that really show a strong vision and a strong strategy and are going to set the scene for all of the evidence that you provide next. Then you're going to talk about how you're going to achieve that. What was it about that strategy that you chose, and what was the outcome that you chose to be able to support it? So how are you going to achieve that? You're going to achieve it through change, through collaboration, through culture, through performance. whatever the reason was, however you want, show in this piece how you're going to achieve that and give some context as to the change that you're about to talk about, right? We're going to achieve that by a 3-year program where we focus on changing our culture by bringing in new collaborative tools to create and empower our people, right? Something like that. Off the top of my head here, something like that. So some really good hows as to what you're going to do it. Then you want to talk about the challenges, okay? So you've said how you're going to do it. Now you're going to say the challenges. How did you get to the point where you decided that you were going to go ahead and do this program, this project, this change? What was it? And this, again, is the evidence base. You know, what were your people telling you? What was your business telling you? What were your Q1 results telling you? What brought you to the point where you needed to do this? And what were the challenges that you were seeing? And the more transparent you can be here, the better. Because you want to show that change in culture, that change, that development from your challenges at the beginning. You really want to show that development. So, you know, be quite frank. We had issues with X. Our people were telling us Y. We couldn't do Z. All of that really good insight. If you've done interviews, you know, share the feedback from them, share the feedback from focus groups, share what the problems were and the rationale for the change. This is really important. You need to talk about why you are doing this, because it's the why that creates the business outcome. Because if you can say, look, these are all issues, and we've overcome these issues, that creates a really strong example of your particular project and how much it has had, how significant an impact it's had on your organization. Then go into the answer. What was the answer? It was clear that we needed to fundamentally change how work gets done by doing X, by achieving Y, by doing Z. Talk about, it was clear from the feedback what you needed to do and how you were going to do it. And how that then created the precedent of your program, your project, your change. And then talk a little bit about the objective of that thing, how long it was going to last, what you're going to be doing of that, and what the purpose of that is. And then talk about your roadmap. How was it all going to pan out? How did it look? What were your intentions for that particular project? How's that roadmap going to look? Then you can start going into the elements of that roadmap and pick out some specific things within that roadmap that you think particularly stand out or are different than your average Joe's thing. Did you do a particular type of onboarding differently? Did you do a particular type of training differently? How were you managing your change, your process over time, right? Were you onboarding through use cases? Were you onboarding in bulk? Why were you doing that? How were you doing that? How were you managing that? What was at the key, the heart of that particular action, right? If you were bringing on use cases, what were you communicating to those people? How were you supporting those people? How were you identifying the use cases? You know, go into the real key processes that were driving the change and the actions that you were doing. And if you've got anything that's new or that you were working Agile through or that you learned and you tried, share that process as much as possible. You know, really, really try and give to the submitting agency. Really try and give to them and say, we want to share the knowledge and we want to share our process, something that we've learned and something that you can then recommend to others and support others with, right? Try and be as giving as you can. The more you can help them help you, the better, right? So talk about how that process looked and how it worked. If you had feedback from it, if it didn't work in some ways, if it did work in some ways, talk a little bit about that. Now you've talked about the engine that's fueling your change. Let's talk about how that change was adopted and how people were starting to do it, right? So what was it about that change that was being adopted by people? So talk about, you know, if you were working in collaboration, talk about how, you know, collaboration's more than just enablement and it's about changing ways of working. Talk about the language that you use, the comms that you use, the engagement that you created, the people that were involved, the testimonials that they've had, the things that they're saying, the high-level benchmark figures for your adoption or your key milestones within your change, right? Talk all about that and the fundamentals behind how you measured it. Right? A benchmark is only a benchmark because it measures something in some way. Now, most benchmarks just count stuff. So you want to be talking about what does that represent? If you're talking about a community and you're talking about the number of people who've created content, what does that represent to your organization? You know, that represents people collaborating. That represents people creating in ways that they haven't been able to do before and creating outcomes that are really, really valuable for your business. And those outcomes align with your strategy and they align with your process and they are fueled by the process that you've talked about earlier. You see, everything's aligning. Everything's running through the story to say, we did this, it resulted in that, and here's the evidence. Then what you want to look at is your objectives, right? Specific benchmarks against your objectives. How are you doing against those objectives? Do you have any numbers to support those objectives specifically? Pick out those objectives one by one. Here's our objective. Here's the amazing result. Here's our objective. Here's the amazing result. Going bang, 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 going through all of those. Evidence, evidence, evidence. Right? So you're really articulating how you've done it, why you've done it, and the fact that it was successful. Now, we've put that all at the front. We haven't started talking about the specific use cases yet. This is where yours is going to really stand out because most people just go straight into the examples with no context. We want them to be looking at the use cases and always thinking in their head, when they refer back to those use cases, I can see how this use case that you've highlighted correlates directly back to your objectives. And I can see how and I can see why. Which means that it has more weight. If you just said we created a community of 1,000 people and it didn't have that context of being tied into your broader objectives or your program or your methodology, it doesn't have the same weight as if you said we've created 1,000 people and here are all the outcomes it aligns to. And this is why it's so significant for our business. That's why we put this stuff first. It's so that when you get into the examples, there's absolutely no denying that every single example you've put in this award submission has lent itself directly towards your amazing outcomes that you flagged earlier. Right? So, right now we're going to go into the implementation side of things. Here's where you start putting the use cases in, right? First of all, some scene setting for your implementation. If you brought in a new platform, what does it look like? How does it work? What do people do, right? Give them let the person who's reading it start to feel like they're inside that platform or they're inside the community. Give them a bit of a heads up on how it looks and what it does, and show that all of those different things were all aligned to the objectives. If you created a homepage and you designed it, talk about all the different elements of that homepage that provide towards your objectives that you mentioned earlier. You know, if you've got different navigation, different areas of your community, different areas of your tools and your platforms, go into each one and say, you know, people directory. The people directory is so important because it does X, Y, and Z. Give context and align it back to your outcomes. And then start talking about your use cases specifically. Okay, and then break them down and try and come up with the outcomes as the titles and the lead-ins to each one of these parts. So, for example, if you're talking about communications, you've got a bunch of comms sites. One thing that you might align that to is breaking down silos. So you've got a bunch of comms sites and now they're accessible by anyone in the business. So the headline might be bringing updates together, breaking down silos, right? The headline is not internal communications engagement. That's not your outcome. That's not a business outcome, right? The business outcome is breaking down silos, for example. Right, so you're going to headline all of these. Every time you title your use case, it's going to have a headline that directly ties back into your outcomes, constantly reinforcing how all these things reinforce your outcomes. Then start talking through each one of those. Include loads of screenshots here. In each one of these pages, include a whole bunch of screenshots for different things. Showcase loads of examples. You know, stack them, layer them, arrange them in a way where there's loads and loads of examples for them. and then start talking about it. You might start talking about things like communications being key to achieving your strategy and providing the right information, distributing strategic and operational communications. You might talk about how teams can design their own groups and pages, how they can sponsor posts and get messages out, and how that shortens the publishing time for communications teams before, and how that creates improved processes for them, faster time to publishing for them, scheduled publishing that I haven't had before. All these operational stuff that happen, it's not just about where the messages go, it's also about how you're also enabling the teams to be able to work more effectively within your outcome. If you talk about leadership as your use case, highlight all your examples of leadership, but say what that represents. This leader is sharing videos on X which support an alignment of his team, allowing him to communicate to his team about X, Y, and Z, and creating feedback where that feedback flags issues and ideas that are carried forward to business outcomes, right? Talk about each individual leader or each individual person rather than generalizing it too much. If you just make it too general and you say, yeah, we've had 300 leadership posts, doesn't get to the outcome. Pick out specific things that leaders are doing, how they're leading the way, how they're creating outcomes, and what those outcomes represent. Highlight comments, highlight testimonials, highlight videos, include screenshots, show how they are communicating and how transformative that is. If you're talking about ways of working, talk about how your platform or your change enables ways of working, and teams that are undergoing ways of working change or cultural change, and people that are supporting that change through your community, through your platform, how they're working with it, how they're able to do something they couldn't do before, how they're fielding questions, how they're creating solutions, how people are engaging with them. Again, dotted with screenshots. If you're talking about developing people, you might talk about how people are able to bring on their career or get career advice or get mentoring or get support. Compare it to what they had before and how they have more now. Compare it to how many people are in the community, how many posts they're creating, how people are getting dream jobs. Share testimonials about that. Show the transformation in those people. Right? If you've got a use case or if you're talking about people change, show transformation. Show posts that people share where they talk about how they landed dream jobs or how they achieved something they never could have done without your change. If you're talking about advocates, show how many there are, show how much they've delivered, show how significant that is, show how many people they've trained, show how much networking they're doing, show how prevalent they are through the organization. All of these things, not just about numbers here, it's about how significant they are and about how they drive success for your change. If you're talking about training, training isn't about training is about embedding change. So you might have a section called Embedding Change where you talk all about your training center and the amount of self-help and learning they're doing, the amount of questions they're asking, how they're supporting each other in peer-to-peer support, how they're helping each other achieve amazing outcomes in training, how many people you've trained, how many people are training themselves, all of this good stuff with screenshots of your training center and the amazing things you've done. If you're talking about peer-to-peer support, describe your peer-to-peer support. Describe your communities that are providing solutions. Show how people are self-servicing. Show how they're asking questions. Show how the help desks are getting involved in answering them. Give some examples of processes that have been shortened. Give examples of things that have been avoided that might have created a risk. Give examples of SLAs that are now not as long or not as costly as they used to be. If you're talking about integration, maybe you're integrating departments, maybe you're integrating front and back office. Show how you're creating outcomes that bring those two worlds together and how those align back to your overall goal of breaking down silos. Show the before and afters, right? Screenshots of how it used to look, how it looks now, and then annotate those screenshots with little arrows and little comments to say all the different things that they can do and all the outcomes that they can create that are aligned back to your broader strategic outcomes. Right? A lot of this stuff is, need to know. You're not going to point out every single thing everywhere. What you're doing is you're picking out all the amazing examples, and these examples might be so small. Sometimes change happens with such a small thing. You can create significant change just by putting the right widget on the right page, right? Just allowing people to make a comment or providing quick links to things. You can shorten processes just by providing the right links on a page. Yeah, it can be that simple, but that doesn't mean because it was simple to do, you should feel like you can't showcase it as a significant thing, right? Just because it was simple to implement doesn't mean that you didn't have a lot of thought to do it. So don't ever put yourself down if you think, well, that was an easy thing, I'm not going to showcase that. If it's made a significant difference to your people, even if it's just one link on a page, you should be pulling that out, because that might be something that created an amazing outcome for your business. If you've got new video going on, if you've got people getting access to apps that they didn't have before, if you've got work-life balance that they might not have had before, if you've got work-life activities that they might have not done before, or maybe they're working remotely and collaborating through their iPad, through bring your own device, any kind of lifestyle stuff. It doesn't just have to be in the office, it might be outside. Have the change you've made are they affecting people's work-life balance and their happiness? If you've got happiness indexes, put those in. Gives you that whole picture, end to end, right? Because then when you've talked about all of this stuff, you see all these examples, then you can kind of summarize it. And then within the summary, again, it needs to be a really, really strong summary that talks all about, we have done so much. We have changed so much. We have achieved all these objectives, but there's still further to go. It's always good to have a summary to just give a little bit of flavor at the end. To say, actually, we've got further to go. Here's some of the things we've got planned in the future. And to kind of keep that conversation open. Not just to close it down. Kind of say, yeah, we've got more to go. We've got things to do. This is what we're looking into next. We're very excited to be on the journey. Right? And that continues the storytelling. Instead of saying the end, it gives you that sort of salivating bit at the end to say, ooh, I'm excited to see what else they're up to. And again, that keeps that conversation going. Now you've provided the complete example of all the change that you've made and how it all ties together. There's no single change that's going to change the culture of business, right? There's no single use case that's going to really significantly change the culture of a large organization. It's the summation of all the use cases, of all the effort, all the community, all the collaboration. It's a summation across your business that creates your change and your transformation. And that's what's missing in so many submissions. Most submissions just pick out individually unrelated things and they don't tie them together as something that creates a uniform transformation. They all come together to create transformation in some way. You just need to tell the story throughout. Now, I know I've covered a ton in this, but hopefully I'm starting to give you some ideas on how to really create this stuff, how to create something really, really compelling. And hopefully I've sparked some excitement in you to think about, I've got examples there. I can think of stuff that Dan's mentioned that I can put in my submission. Hopefully I've got you really thinking about what you can do and the story that you can tell. And whether you go all out and create this big pack and use this pack for multiple awards, or whether you just pick elements of what I said today and turn that into short stories that you pull out, the principles behind what I'm talking about will apply, however you want to use them. Now, the last thing, which is a bit of a wild card in award submissions, is if you need to create a video. Now, videos are a funny thing. I have, in the past, created a video that has won at a conference on zero budget with just me and a camera, and it's beaten upwards of 100k creative agency videos, right? Huge budget videos. I'm not going to go into exactly how you create an awards video today because I know we've covered so much already, but I will give you some hints and tips on that. Firstly, if you're going to create a video for your award, align it with your outcomes all the time. Secondly, make it funny, right? Have fun. Thirdly, make it friendly. So just talk to the camera, have fun, do a few fun things that people can laugh at. And fourthly, and most importantly, just make it authentic, right? Just create a fun, exciting video that summarizes your outcomes, that puts them in context, and doesn't feel like a ye olde corporate video, right? If you do that, if you create something that stands out, that's fun, doesn't like list a whole load of corporate stuff, doesn't just do a whole load of ancient stuff, you can win. You can win with a zero budget video and, just a really good concept and a fun concept. I'm going to talk more about that in another podcast. If you want to hear more about that, then do get in touch. So there you go. Loads covered today. Loads. You're going to have to come back and listen to this again and kind of take it all down. I haven't got a cheat sheet for it at the moment, but if you're interested in a cheat sheet, email me, dan@imdanthomas.com. I'll put together a cheat sheet for you if that's something that you're interested in. Really want to hear from you. If you want to hear more about what I've taught today, you want to go into a little bit more detail about these awards, then get in touch with me. dan@imdanthomas.com. Make sure you get in touch or leave me a voicemail. If this has helped you, if you started putting a pack together, if you are now going to go off and do something amazing and get some recognition, please get in touch with me. Leave me a voicemail. Dial up I'm Dan Thomas on Skype. Let it ring for a little bit and then leave me a voicemail when it goes to voicemail. Really, really want to hear from you. If you haven't subscribed to the show, subscribe to the show. Leave me a rating and review. And find my channel on YouTube. I'm Dan Thomas. Lots and lots more on that as well. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Hope that's valuable. Have an awesome weekend, everybody. I've got lots more coming up for you. More interviews, more snippets from me, a follow-up to the advocate session that I did the other day as well, looking into more detail from that. I think you're going to really like that one. And lots more content. So have an awesome weekend, everybody. See you soon.